my favorite radio talk show host and political analyst in the whole of the United States of America, the one and only Garland Nixon, joins me now. Garland, it's been a big week, if not for the American taxpayer, then for the beneficiaries of United States taxpayer largesse. That's a lot of money to send overseas when your country is coming apart at the seams, no?
It's a tremendous amount of money. And what we're learning now is that even the 2023 budget of 846 right around $850 billion for the military industrial complex was still full of hidden figures, because since then we've added another 100 to 110 billion for the Ukraine conflict, and now they're adding basically another 100 billion. So not including all of the machinations used by the intelligence community that cost hundreds of billions of dollars. We're now well over $1 trillion for our military budget, and now the American people are understanding that whatever astronomical number that they get yearly for the defense budget will be supplemented time and again by the uniparty, basically.
Yeah, I mean, leaving aside the opportunity cost of all that money, and we'll come back to that, what does this do to the dollar? I mean, this money is just being printed. It's baseless, this money, isn't it?
Yes, and very interestingly now, the Biden administration has moved to the argument that this is going to be good for the economy, that it's going to create jobs. But most economists, generally most economists who are responsible will tell you that war spending is in and of itself inflationary. When you build a road, it's usable for infrastructure. When you build things that can be used to advance your economic interest, you get a continual return on investment. When you build military objects and war material, you can either store it or you can blow it up. Those are the only two things that you can do. So it is in and of itself inflationary. So what they've done is they've created an environment where, notwithstanding all the terrible things that will happen as a result of the military conflict, we're going to have inflation simply because of all the other money that's being printed. And of course, they're going to have to run around the world to China and whoever else will buy their buy the treasury bills and try to finance this crazy spending again.
What's going to happen with the Democratic Party's campaign? They were all cheering in the Congress, but the Democrats were cheering loudest. They have transformed themselves into the most, not since the Vietnam War, have I seen a Democratic Party government in power that is more savagely warlike and imperialistic. How does that play with their base?
Not very well. The base of the Democratic Party, they have come to the realization that this is not a party that reflects the morals and the concerns of their so-called constituents, that they are not represented by their what would normally be the constituents of the particular party. The other thing I think that is getting more and more clear is that the Democratic Party is now basically in control of the House again, that the two parties have melded together. Speaker Mike Johnson, of course, now will likely be facing a Republican Party that's going to try to unseat him, and the Democrats will have to join in. They will have to give him some votes to save his hide. However, this won't be the last time. So basically now the only thing that keeps Mike Johnson in power will be Democrat votes, and that I suspect that the Republican base will go after him repeatedly and force the Democrats to bail him out over and over again, and to put an exclamation on the mark on the point that he is completely divorced from the foundation of the Republican Party.
Turning to them then, of course there were remnants of America First in the Congress, but key Republicans are now indistinguishable from the Democrats. They look, as George Orwell put it, from pig to man, from man to pig, and can no longer tell the difference.
Yeah, I think the difference in the two parties is that in the Republican Party, there is an element that if I can't really call them anti-war per se, but I can say that there is an element in the Republican Party that is less inclined to conflict, that wants to turn down the volume, particularly in Ukraine, and to some extent that wants to turn down the volume in other parts of the world. So the Democratic Party is fully on board with the neocons. The Democratic Party is now basically the Republican Party of 2004. We now have the Republican Party of George Bush fully in control of the Democratic Party. And if you look, you'll see the same exact people who supported that party, who many of them who were speechwriters, who were literally worked within the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, are now hardcore supporters of the Biden administration. But as I said, the Republican Party still has an element there that opposes this. I think that's the main difference between the two parties.
Well, let's break down the various theaters. Let's start with Gaza. First of all, tell us what's going on the campuses of the United States. The proximate reason for my question being the call for the National Guard to come on the campus of Columbia University. Those of us old enough to remember Kent State University know just what could go wrong there.
Well, the numbers are overwhelming. I think somewhere considerably less than 20% of Americans under 30 years old support Joe Biden's Gaza policies. So we see that young America has completely abandoned the Biden administration. Now, what we see is like such as places as Columbia University, students who have, basically gone all out now. They're occupying areas of the campus. I've seen videos where they've gone around the campus and put up signs. There'll be the name of a building and they'll change the name of the building to a place in Gaza to Khan Yunis or whatever. So they're taking considerable actions. We see on the West Coast closing down the Golden Gate Bridge and doing a number of things. So the young Americans are really pushing back against the conflict. Something else that I think is interesting, and that is I've had a number of people who had previously applied or previously considered joining the military 4 or 5 years ago say now they're getting calls that like the military is going out reaching back to people who tried 4 and 5 years ago to try to re-recruit them in. I think the military, most people don't really know the numbers now, but I think the military is having an extremely difficult time in recruiting because the young people are basically saying we won't fight for the United States. We're not comfortable with the policy anymore. And I'll end by saying this, which means how does the United States go out and start World War III? How do they go out and start a war when if the United States were to start some massive war and say, OK, that's it, we're going to have to do a draft, that millions of young Americans would absolutely refuse to do it. They would not have the support. The U.S. could not do a draft right now. Absolutely. The country would fall apart.
Nonetheless, your government has apparently, and I think I have it on good authority, they've given a green light for an assault on Rafah, which will make Fallujah look like a walk in the park. And this is presumably to reward Israel for ending the tit-for-tat with Iran.
Well, when we hear that the U.S. has given Israel a green light, or that the U.S. The Biden administration is at odds with the Israeli leadership over something, I'm very suspicious about that because recent stories came out that Joe Biden had said he was in favor of a two-state solution. That was what he said, publicly, and that privately there were messages going, that he had sent that absolutely he wasn't. So it was just as Hillary Clinton had said, he has a public position and a private position. I really suspect, and more people are starting to suspect, that the Biden administration is aligned with the Netanyahu plan. With the most extreme factions in the Israeli government, and basically they are trying to pretend as though they're pushing back to keep the heat off. So I don't think the Biden administration is opposed to it or that they have to green light it. I think they're on board and they're all plotting together to see how they can get this accomplished.
Well, let's come out of the frying pan and dive into the fire. The money that's going to Ukraine is likely to escalate, perhaps in one last desperate throw of missile attacks, the ability of the Kiev regime to take territory is virtually zero. But their ability to take the war to Russia with this new money maybe will trigger a Russian response that you might say will be wholly disproportionate.
You know, I would look at, to evaluate that, I would compare that with what's happening with Iran. And that is that both Iran and Russia understand that they're winning. And they understand that because they're winning, their adversaries are desperate and trying to provoke them to take some action that may be considered over the top, some action that their adversaries could then point to and say they're irrational and unreasonable. And so I think Russia is prepared for some kind of attacks. I think they're prepared to absorb them. I think Russia we're looking at now slowly. Village after village is falling. Russia is on the move and they're winning. So in the same way that very wisely the Iranians absorbed a minor attack from, or one may call it a symbolic attack from the Israelis and just shook it off, seeing that they were winning. Why mess up if you're winning? I think the Russians, while we may bother them, while they will highly protest, I think they are prepared to absorb more hits. They understand that the desperation of their adversaries and their losing will cause them to reach out. But I think they're going to continue to take their victories on the battlefield. And again, I'll end this up by saying this. In a way, one of the worst things that could have happened to the Biden administration is to get this money, because they're going to get this money and argue to their constituents that now they'll be able to stop the Russians and now they'll win. There'll be an expectation of victory, an expectation of some kind of a military success. What happens if they get this money and the next couple of months things fall apart and people are unhappy enough with the money going out, and then they say, wait a minute, you told us this money was going to make a difference, and Ukraine fell anyway. In the long run, I don't think it's going to benefit the narrative of the Biden administration.
Finally, Garland, where stands Donald Trump this fine spring day?
Well, I'll put it like this. He's in a difficult position because the intelligence machine is doing everything they can to take Donald Trump out. They're trying their best to take Donald Trump out. They're throwing the kitchen sink at him. Donald Trump, let me just say this, just like it's similar to what's happening in Ukraine and Israel. Donald Trump stands to win right now. Joe Biden is confused. He's saying his father was eaten by cannibals. I don't know what's going on with this guy. He's completely lost it. But Donald Trump is sitting here. All he has to do is kind of continue the fight and stay available until November. And I think he wins this very easily. So Donald Trump, the fact of the matter is this. I hear people who are very much opposed. I do radio and on a lot of different venues, so I get a lot of different callers. I hear people who are very much opposed to Donald Trump still absolutely admit, well, yeah, clearly they're just going after Donald Trump to stop him from winning. So it's clear to most people that what we're looking at is lawfare. This is not harming Donald Trump. It's not harming his numbers at all. And I also think that some very powerful people are starting to come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is going to win, and they're going to start climbing on the Trump bandwagon because, hey, everybody's going to wants to get on a train once it's left the station. And I think the Trump train is moving downhill towards November, the election in November.
I said finally, but really finally, who were these dreadful cannibals that ate President Biden's uncle?
I think they exist with a corn pop and the other made up figures that Joe Biden has conjured over the course of the year. So yeah, people now are accustomed to Joe Biden's many slip ups and his confusion. So cannibals, it's just Joe Biden.
It even by his standards, it was quite a slip up. Garland Nixon, thank you very much indeed for your wisdom and your humour. Garland Nixon, radio talk show host, political analyst, and the coolest cat in America.